let you know when we're live. Chairman, we're now live.
Welcome to today's meeting of the Residents' Services Select Committee at the London Borough of Hillingdon. This meeting is being broadcast live on the Council's YouTube channel, Hillingdon, London. The purpose of this committee is to monitor services areas within the Council that fall within its terms of reference. Details of the business to be considered today are shown on the agenda, copies of which are accessible on YouTube underneath the broadcast. My name is Councillor Colin Sullivan. I am the Vice Chairman of this committee and will be chairing the meeting today. Allow me to introduce those present. Councillors Darren Davis, Hector Goel, Peter Smallwood, Scott Farley, Janet Gardner and Sita Punja. Officers in attendance are Liz Penny, Democratic Services Officer, Maggie Nelson, Head of Housing Needs, and Melissa Blower, Housing Project Manager. Housekeeping. Before we start, some important housekeeping for those present. Please ensure all mobile phones are on silent. If the fire alarm goes off, please follow officers out of the building. Please remember to turn on microphones before speaking. The agenda. We will now move on to the agenda. Item 1, apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies?
Yes, Chairman, we have received apologies from Councillor Wayne Bridges, with Councillor Darren Davis substituting. Thank you.
Item 2, declarations of interest in matters before this meeting. Do any members present have any declarations of interest on this matter, any matters being discussed tonight? Item 3, minutes of the meeting on 26 September 2023. Does anyone have any comments on the accuracy of the minutes? If not, are these agreed? Item 4, confirm that all items of business on today's agenda will be considered in public. Agenda items. Item 5, the Locata Housing System. Maggie Nelson, Head of Housing Needs, and Melissa Blower, Housing Project Manager. Item 6, Forward Plan. Liz Penny, Democratic Services Officer. Work Programme. Item 7, Liz Penny, again Democratic Services Officer. That's all? Right. Item 5. Thank you.
Excuse me. So we're going to be doing just a quick presentation on the Locator system. Locator system is a choice-based letting system, and it's an online system, often called CBL, which is accessible to all residents across the borough and anyone who wishes to apply to join the housing register. Our social housing allocations policy sets out and governs how we assess and determine which applicants are eligible to join the register, which priority banding they receive once they're being assessed, and what their bedroom size need is. Locator is the most commonly used choice-based letting system amongst all local authorities. So accessibility and compatibility. Locator is not only a computer-friendly system, but it also can be used via tablet, via mobile phone, and that makes it much easier for people to use, regardless of what type of system that they're using. So people can use it on the go with their mobile phone, etc. It's very easy and it's simple for users. It's very straightforward, and it directs the applicant through all the necessary steps at each stage if they're applying. Applicants can have direct access to the system at any time through the application. And once the Locator application has been completed and submitted, the information is fed into Civica, which is our system that processes the assessment, and that's where it's initiated. The application also then directly feeds into Northgate. Northgate's system caters for all the other housing elements, so things like the rent accounts, the tenancy details, and also estates management. The way to apply is that applicants will apply online. They're expected to apply online. Applicants only need to have an email address. That's the only requirement for them to have to start the application and complete it. And there's only one form to complete, which takes no longer than 20 to 30 minutes. Applicants are expected to upload their documents, or any documentary evidence like ID or previous address histories and things like that, they can upload those on the system. It's very straightforward. Excuse me. It doesn't want to work now. For some reason, not here. Thank you. Okay, so the application process, as I said, is really simple and straightforward. Although we've said that applicants are expected to do it online, we are obviously aware that there are some applicants who are not able to do that. And so in those situations, we can provide a paper form, but that's usually very unusual for us to do that, only because if people have difficulty, either they're not PC savvy or they don't have access to a PC, then we can provide a paper document for people. But the application process is simple. You can stop and start it when you want to. You can leave it and come back to it and continue it. And it's confidential. Nobody else can access it. And then it's one account from start to finish. And then once the application is completed and it's registered, all the documents that the customer adds or any changes that they need to make, they can simply go onto the same account and make those changes. They can use the same system to bid for properties, and that's all placed through one account. And all offers of accommodation are also done through that same account, with documents being stored on the same account. So as I said, it's just literally one account. They don't need to go backwards and forwards between. That was a bit of a whistle-stop tour, obviously, and you might have some questions about something I've said or something else that has come into your mind as a result of something I've said. So please feel free to ask any questions, and I will do my best to answer them for you.
Councillor Gower.
Thank you. I was just reading through the report here, and on page 10 on the paper report, but 14 on the e-report, depending on what you're looking at, there's a residence by priority bands. I was just wondering why there's so many more in Band B than any other band, and how often that gets reassessed. It doesn't seem to make sense to me why there's literally double the amount of people in Band B than there are in Band A or Band C.
So if I can just pick up the answer to that one. So all of our bandings are based around priority. So you would expect that Band A would be the absolute highest priority, and so that is reserved for those that are sort of really urgent situations. Band B is people with a lesser urgent need, but still quite an urgent need to move. Because it is a housing register rather than a waiting list, what you tend to see is that the Band A applicants on a shortlist will always come before those who are on a Band B. And so quite often, most of the properties that we allocate are to people who are in that higher banding of the Band A. And so whilst people in Band B still have a very urgent need to move, they remain on the housing register for longer periods of time.
Follow-up question?
Just if I could clarify the second part, which is how often does it get reviewed or evaluated?
Oh, apologies. We review, we send out an annual review to all applicants every year, just to make sure that everybody is still happy to be registered on the housing register. However, we only carry out a fresh review of people's bandings upon receipt of new information, or at the point that somebody may be becoming shortlisted for a property, so when they're in the top few applicants to be potentially securing. And then we check that everything remains the same as it was at the initial point of assessment. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Chairman, sorry. My question's on page 10 as well. We've got the table there which has the shortest and longest wait times. How is this data collated? Because it's saying that the shortest date has been 1 day, but then obviously someone's waited 24 years. How does that work? Months. No, it does say yes. Sorry.
It's based on an average, to be honest, that we pull from those that actually allocated accommodation. Yeah. So it doesn't necessarily take into account everybody who's still on the housing register waiting. So right. It depends on when somebody was let a property and how long they've been in that band. And because of that, it doesn't necessarily always pick up the full length of the waiting time, because you may have been waiting, say, in Band C for a considerable period of time and then move on to being in a Band B for a shorter period of time and then be allocated.
Right, okay, thank you. That looked quite scary, actually. 37 years for shelter accommodation could be quite scary. Thank you.
Your follow-up question? Councillor Gardner?
I thought you'd tell me Mike was here. Crikey, no. Well, you didn't mention it earlier, but I'd like to know what an enhanced banding is, because I have people come into the surgery who are Band A enhanced. Is that the Band A medical? Is that how you describe that one?
So we have additional priority criteria. So somebody may be in a, say, Band C because they are lacking one bedroom and overcrowded. But if they either have 10 years residency within Hillingdon, are a working household working 24 hours or more, are a childless couple, they can get an additional enhancement to go up one band, which means that they're then enhanced to a Band B. And that's the same for somebody who's in B, who meets the same criteria, they'd be enhanced to a Band A.
Follow? Yeah, it's very difficult trying to work out. What are exactly the qualifications for successful applications? Because I know some people, they claim that they've not been put on the Carter. So how do you work out whether they qualify or not?
So we operate a housing register that will only have people who have a housing need. So that means that there needs to be some sort of requirement that the property is unsuitable in some way. So that could be for medical reasons, overcrowding, but there would have to be a need to move. So if somebody, for instance, was living in a 2-bedroom private rented accommodation and their family was a 2-bedroom need, then they wouldn't qualify to join the housing register because they're suitably housed in their current accommodation.
Sorry. If people are on Band B and below, I mean, what we say to people, I wouldn't bother, because you could wait for ages. If you're a Band, I mean, B is a no-no, basically. I mean, I just wonder, when people register and they're put on a Band C or Band D, do you actually give them the reality of that they may very possibly be waiting, obviously not 35 years, because that's absolutely ridiculous. I'd like a sheltered housing, but I should have applied for it a long time ago. No, but do you explain to them that the likelihood of them not actually getting somewhere?
At the point of application, we do send out a banding letter to the resident, which does explain around waiting times, and that realistically we're unlikely to be able to offer to everybody that joins our housing register, just due to the sheer demand for that type of accommodation. Because it is a housing register, you know, it does always mean that new people are joining Band A all the time, and so if you are in the lower bands, there is a less likelihood of you getting accommodation. It also depends as well on bed size needs. So if you're a 1-bedroom need in a Band B, there is a good chance that you might secure accommodation, or because we have much more of that type of accommodation than that of a family who are maybe seeking a 4-bed. But we do explain that at the point of giving somebody a banding.
A lot of people are not computer literate, okay. Also, a lot of people don't have English as a first language and they don't read too well. So when you send them the letter, is it in any other languages apart from English? And if not, I mean, a lot of people are too embarrassed to say they don't understand what things are. They come to our surgeries and say, what does this mean? So I just wonder if there's I don't know if there's anything in place for that.
There is. Our letters are primarily sent out in English, but we do have translation services available. And we also have user guides that are translated as well, should anybody need them.
Thank you for that. I just wanted to understand the criteria for the bans, because when you say something is lesser urgent and urgent, what criteria meets urgency in terms of your assessments?
Well, it's also out in our social housing allocations policy, but usually in terms of urgency, it's around the severity of the needs. So, for instance, one that we award Band C if you're lacking one bedroom, you're overcrowded by one bedroom. Band B if you're lacking 2 or more bedrooms, because that's more urgent. In terms of Band A, they tend to be applicants who have real urgent medical emergency needs to move to enable fostering or adoption, if somebody needs to move due to fear of violence. And so it's reserved for the most urgent needs, and hospital bed blockers as well is included in that.
Okay. And so to go on from that, because you talked about kind of like the menus of overcrowding and medical needs. So when residents are in both criteria, as has been the case recently for residents that I've had to deal with, what happens then? Because basically they get put onto overcrowding rather than medical, and something that I've found is that actually in social housing that is provided by social housing providers like L&Q or other companies, that actually medical is something that people get pushed and get those accommodations in. And so are we all working from the same kind of hymn sheet in that sense in terms of our criteria? And why is it that we can't put more than one so that we don't kind of miss an opportunity to get them off the housing register and on into a property?
I think in terms of are we all working sort of from the same hymn sheet, no, not really. Every provider will have their own allocations policy for how they allocate accommodation, especially if they hold their own waiting list, which many housing associations do. Our system doesn't really allow for you to put in more than one reason. So what we tend to do, if we have somebody with sort of dual reasons to be on the housing register, they can go to a panel where we then look at that individually, and that then presents the opportunity for us to potentially award a higher banding because there are multiple reasons why that person needs to move.
What if that higher banding, they're already in the higher banding, what happens at the panel then?
If they're already in the highest banding we can award, then we can only sort of allocate one reason as to why that might be, and we do tend to go with the one that might attract additional priority. So, as you said, some housing associations will provide enhanced banding options for those who are seeking medical, and so really that should be given as a primary reason on their account.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask, when someone's applying on the Locata system, do you tell them what they need to provide when they're first doing it, and what might aid their application, and like what format they need it in? Like, so if they have to upload a passport, for example, or whatever they have to upload, are they told everything in advance? And is there, if they then get, say, a medical letter or something, is there a way of updating it? And then once updated, is that then looked at, following from my previous question, is that then updated as part of the review?
Yes, so if somebody submits the application, once you get to the end of the application point, it gives you a list of documents that you need to provide to support your application. And part of that will ask for example, if it's around medical, it will ask for medical information. If then at the point that we assess the application, we review and we feel that maybe there may be more supported medical information needed or any other additional information, we'll write out to the resident to ask for that. That then is our initial assessment. So if anybody's circumstances changes throughout the period of time that they're on the housing register, or they get new information that they need us to review, we're always happy to accept new information and review the application based on the information we've now received. And so that means that throughout the period that somebody is on the housing register, their banding could go up several times based on circumstances having changed.
Thank you.
Councillor Smallwood.
Thank you, Chair. The need for housing often sadly mirrors digital poverty. How are we tackling digital poverty in relation to the locator system?
We have the option for people to be able to access it at certain points like libraries, etc. But if somebody isn't able to access online at all, then there are systems in place where we can set the system up to automatically bid for properties on that person's behalf. We need to understand what sort of preferences they have in terms of accommodation, and then the system will automatically do that for them. And then at the point that they then would require, become shortlisted and maybe available for an offer, we would contact them to make contact and see about viewing, etc.
Follow-up?
Yeah, again, unfortunately, there is a correlation between the need for housing and the lack of literacy. How are we supporting people, especially adults, who can't read, and therefore or may misinterpret what is needed from the forms that are going out?
We usually would refer somebody to support agencies if they need assistance to complete the application, if friends and family aren't available to help with that. We also are able to assist people with telephone calls, etc., to follow up with that and tell people what we need if it seems as though we're not able to get it because of literacy issues. The form itself does identify if there are any support needs, so we know that we can follow up with people should we need to do that verbally rather than writing out to people.
One final one, if I may, Chair. Thank you. I have examples of where people are sent letters telling them that their band has changed, and then they go onto the locator, I don't know which one it is, I apologise. They go onto the system and find out that their banding has not been updated on the system, which can cause distress. I mean, if I've got this completely wrong, and you can give me an explanation as to why, but that does seem pretty simple. If we're sending someone a letter, surely the letter matches up to the system, or they talk to each other, or do they not? I just wanted to understand, because I've got multiple examples of that of my own, and I'm sure colleagues who deal with a lot more housing cases than I do will have endless streams of those examples.
We do have two systems actually that we use for this. So Locator is the sort of front of house system that residents use to place bids, that we advertise properties on, but we also have a back office system. The two do talk to each other, but occasionally you'll find that there's a delay when we have to do the overnight upload. So if we email somebody a letter and then they open it, initially the system won't be updated because it goes overnight. And there can be occasions when the data load doesn't take place, which can then lead to the two systems not matching at that time.
Chair, I really apologise, and I know I'm taking advantage here, but surely if one of the council's priorities is the digitalisation of the council, so surely the digital should be leading the written, and I just wonder whether we could go away and look at that. I'm sure it would just be good to look at that, because I think the digitalisation should lead it, because people are naturally going to be looking at that and maybe not looking for a letter to arrive in the post.
Absolutely, and we'd be happy to take that back and look away and see what we can do to improve that.
Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Chairman. I have a couple of questions, and I will try and be as quick as I can, if I may, Chairman. First one is the panel. Is this the hardship panel? Is that what we're...
It is, yes.
So who sits on the hardship panel? Is it just a housing team, or is it other professionals?
It's usually senior management within the housing team, although we have had panels where other professionals who are working with families attend.
Right, okay. If I may. So I just wanted to also go back to the banding. I've got residents that are in private rented property that are overcrowded, but their locator band hasn't changed. How is that decided? So say a resident is they're in a 2-bedroom house, 4 children, two adopted, one with medical needs, are still only on a band B. How is that assessed through the locator system?
So in order for us to carry out any sort of assessment, we usually need somebody to notify us of change for us to be able to trigger and review a case. So if, for example, 2 additional household members are included, or if you have a new child, then we would have a change of circumstances, and at that point we review the application based on the number of bedrooms, and we would do a reassessment of the case. If anybody thinks that they may have been awarded the wrong banding, then there is a review process, and so people are able to submit an appeal. We'll take a fresh look at the case, and a new officer will look and make sure that there is the right decision been made in any case. And if it's, for example, where it is to enable fostering or adoption, any of those cases usually come with supporting information from social services to advise that it is to to enable that, and that then triggers the person to be awarded a Band A.
Okay. Chairman, if I may, one very last short one. Thank you. Fraud.
Yeah.
How much fraud do you get through the locator system? So I see a number of residents who come to me that have genuine cases, but in my untrained opinion, I believe some may not have genuine but know how to use the system. How does that work with you guys, and how do you worm that out?
I'm afraid I don't think I'd be able to give you any figures in terms of how much fraud we receive in terms of applications. But one of the systems that we have put in place is that at the point that somebody is shortlisted for a property, so they're coming in the top 5 or 10 for a property, we carry out checks to make sure that the application is all the information on the application is correct. And one of those checks that we do is with our counter fraud team, who will carry out inspections on our behalf. We carry out a number of checks in terms of council tax, rent accounts, etc., to make sure that everything is okay to meet the criteria and that it is as it should be.
Okay, thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Farley.
Thank you, Chair. Initial query I've just got, you mentioned about the documentation that's loaded. And it says in the report on page 9, upload documents online, 7 stored in one place. Are these sort of like buckets for specific document types? So like one is medical, one is children, one is whatever. Is that how it works?
Yeah, I believe so. It gives what the document type is when you upload it. So you might say it's a birth certificate or ID or income proof.
Right, okay. So that, the inference being that 7 documents are the ones that you need, or that's the maximum you need depending on what the circumstances are if there's no medical. Okay, fine. The banding, let's just go back on this because it's just a very interesting area and how this works. So there were 4 bands, and I think it's pretty safe to say that, you know, if you win band B to D, which is about 80% of what we have in terms of the numbers, are going to go nowhere. They're going to get nothing. Therefore, what is the point of the other bands? Because the worry is we're offering false hope to residents. I mean, can you say how many people that are on a band B in the last 10, 20 years have been given housing through this system?
I'm afraid I don't have the statistics to hand as to how many people have been housed on lower bandings, but by all means we can share that after the meeting. It really depends with the lower bands around the property type and the number of people that we have waiting for every property. So the smaller households, so your 1s and 2 beds, are likely to secure a property if they're on a band B, because we have less people going for them and a lot higher proportion of stock. Whereas those going for the sort of 3 and 4 bedroom properties are less likely to secure a property on a band B. We do publish some of the waiting times and some of the figures that we do around the numbers of lets that we do annually, so people can see where they may be. And on Locator system itself, it provides a feedback option, so it does tell you where you would have been on a shortlist for any property that you bid for. And so that does give people an understanding of where they are and if their position is moving at any point throughout that time. We have a housing register because we have to maintain a housing register for anybody that's in a reasonable preference group. So that's people who are overcrowded, people who have medical needs. But we try to be as realistic as we can about the fact that if you're on a lower banding, it's unlikely that we're going to be able to meet your need through this route.
And yeah, I mean, it does concern me because you have residents at surgeries and they say, I've been bidding for God knows how long, I want a band B. The numbers in that, just for clarity purposes, in that table on page 10, number of lets, so you've got 11,000 properties that are council properties. Now these are the council-owned properties in that list.
Yep.
That's the total. So we have got obviously a high proportion of, as you say, smaller bed properties, which is a big issue when a lot of the residents we get in surgeries are wanting 3, 4 beds. So that does clarify things, but it just worries me that I'm glad that you are being truthful with residents, and that's good to hear. Obviously, it's not good that we are as a council not able to get people, particularly when they're overcrowded in larger families, into properties quickly. Just for contrast, this figure of 3575, that's as of when?
Was that the beginning of the month's figures?
Yes.
Yeah.
Beginning of October.
Beginning of October.
Okay. And can you just I've got to get some comparison. Do we know what at the same period of time what the overall housing need was in terms of housing list? So beyond the council, so you got where you present people, then they go off to private sector. Do you actually have a sort of, just so we can sort of contextualise that element to the overall housing situation?
Can I just clarify, do you mean in terms of like the numbers of people that we have approaching as homeless, as well as those that are on the housing register?
So it's the overall housing demand, I guess you could say.
We do, yes. I think in terms of the overall housing demand, we have around 450 households that have approached for housing advice, and about the same amount that are in relief. So that means that we have taken an initial homeless application. However, some of those will represent the numbers that are already within the 3,500, because once somebody is owed a prevention duty, they are included on our housing register. So that does represent a pretty full figure of those that we're approaching for a housing need.
Just to clarify that, so if someone's presenting is homeless, you're saying that they go onto Locato automatically?
Yes, if someone's approaching us as homeless and we owe them a prevention duty or a relief duty, they are added onto the housing register. It is in one of the lower bands initially, but they are added onto the housing register. Okay.
And again, sorry, Chair, is it possible for us to get outside of the committee the sort of specific qualifications per banding? Because I'd just be interested to know what it is that qualifies you for D, et cetera, et cetera.
Absolutely, and that's all in our social housing allocations policy, but I'd be happy to walk you through that if needed.
Councillor Bridges.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask a specific question because it comes up quite a lot in our surgeries, and it kind of is about both tables, in fact, so we can have a bit of clarification on them. So when you do a review of a case and you move somebody up a band, they have to start from the point of that band upgrade.
That's correct, yeah.
And nothing is taken into account that they might have been waiting, let's say, 10 years.
No.
Why is that?
So I suppose, again, it's about reflecting the need and the change in the need. So, for instance, if I join the housing register as a band C today, or 5 years ago, but actually my circumstances have now got so much more urgent that I need to go to a band A, it's only from today that I'm in the situation that I am a band A, and so it isn't necessarily fair that you then, your time is longer than somebody that's been in an urgent situation for the last year. And that's why the priority date only changes at the point that the circumstances change.
Follow-up? Understood. And then going back onto the other table about the waiting times, how is that calculated? Because I believe that Locator's only been in existence for about 15 years. So is this like pre-Locator, you're 37 years and you're 17 years? Is that you just calculating that data from that period, or?
So at the point that we joined Locator, we migrated all of our cases onto the system. And so anybody who had an existing waiting list or housing register application, their priority date time went with them, which is why it's then reflected as that length of time on Locator.
So if we're sitting there saying, yes, I appreciate that it's not fair. However, when you've got medical conditions that, you know, as people have with children, where that urgency might be that the child is autistic at age 2, by the time they're age 7, that of course it's become urgent, and they've really outgrown that home. So I just can't understand how that is assessed, because we're now getting lots of people, I appreciate, on housing urgencies, but I just feel that the longer they're on the waiting list and until they get that review, these children are growing up in very, very dire, unhealthy, health deprivating circumstances. And how does that kind of come out? Because is there a point where then the medical becomes more important than, and this is why I was trying to talk about the panel, because once you're in that overcrowding, this assessment, there's something that doesn't feel like it's joined up in this, and I appreciate that it's not easy because you've got drop-down menus and you don't have the ability to put loads of things in, but I just want to understand the holistic nature in which we're looking at a criteria where just because they've been in Band B or Band C for 10 years, and I appreciate the urgent need is on that day, does it mean that their welfare and their need hasn't grown because of what has happened in their circumstance of their child's health or their own personal health?
No, I completely appreciate that, and I think that's why when we have the multiple competing needs, that we do have to take it into consideration in the hardship panel. I mean, it does mean that if someone's already in the highest band, there really isn't very much that we can do in terms to enhance that. But we do try to work quite closely with our colleagues in social services or any other agencies that might be working with a family, so we can try to get the maximum information as early as possible, so that if somebody is likely to have a need that is really going to progress, that we can try to get somebody moved as quickly as possible within the guidance of what we can do.
Councillor Garden.
I might have misheard you. You said that anybody who comes in as homeless immediately goes on to the CASA, but I thought that you have to be in the borough for 10 years before you can register.
No, so anybody who is an accepted prevention case or an accepted relief case, so we accept that they have a need that they're going to be homeless soon, or that they are already homeless and they're in the relief duty, will be registered onto our housing register. Anybody who is in either of those bands will go in at Band D until the full application has been assessed, but that is everybody, that's not only those who have 10 years residency.
Councillor Farley.
Thank you. From the residents' point of view, when they use the system, my understanding is that they have the option for 3 bids a week?
Yep, that's correct, yeah.
Okay. And how does that refresh itself on a weekly basis? Is it end of the week, beginning of the week, middle of the week?
No. So it used to be that it was every Monday to Monday, but the system has now changed so that it's more flexible for people to be able to place bids on any day, and they run for at least a 7-day cycle. So ideally, any resident would want to register to log on the same day each week to make sure that they don't miss anything out of a bidding cycle.
So that's because the properties only sit on the system for
7 days.
7 days.
You can extend the adverts if you wished. It's, for example, if there was a new build, maybe you might want to put it on there for longer, but they're for a minimum of 7 days.
Okay. So when you say a minimum of 7 days, that's because it hasn't been snapped up, which it probably would have been done, I guess.
I think it's a system that we use with other housing associations and other local authorities, and so other partners have decided that they want to be able to put adverts on there for longer if it's maybe less desirable property in their stock. Most of our adverts will only be published for 7 days.
Okay, so just want to get my head around this. So at some point in the week, the team, whoever it is that uses this, updates the system, puts a block of properties that are available on the system. They stay there 7 days, and then there are either new ones are added or they're refreshed with, I guess, whatever has been allocated, been taken away, and payments replaced. Okay.
Yes, so we would put any new voids on a weekly basis. The only reason why you would re-advertise a property would be if for some reason that property didn't go in the first round of adverts. But it is quite rare that a property then is repeatedly placed on located because of demand.
Sorry, Chair. I'm just trying to in my head. There have been instances when residents have said they've gone into the system, they're allowed to bid, then the property somehow is not available to them, or they've bidden it and it's now disappeared before the 7 days, or within less than a week. Do we know why that happens?
Yeah, occasionally properties will be withdrawn from Locator, and it's usually for one of two reasons. Either because of how we advertise properties, we will advertise a property when we get notification that it's going to be a forthcoming void, and so it may be that property then, for whatever reason, isn't going to become void, or maybe the tenant is going to remain, etc., and so the property has to be withdrawn from the system. Or it may be that an urgent need to move has come in for some reason and it needs to be withdrawn from choice-based lettings in order to do a direct allocation outside of choice-based lettings.
And those that they're clicking on that are not available so they can see it, but they can't actually select it. What's that about?
So Locator also is a system that will allow you to see some properties that aren't necessarily eligible for you to bid for. So it depends on what part of the system you look at them. So if you log in to your actual account, it will only show you the properties that you're eligible for. So for instance, if I was a 2-bedroom need, it wouldn't show me bungalows that are for people who are 60 plus. Whereas if you look at it earlier on in the system without specifically logging in, it will show you the availability of all accommodation that you might not necessarily be eligible for. There are other properties that have restrictions on them, such as age restrictions, or it might be an adaptive property, so it will only show those to people who have a requirement for adaptive properties. And some properties will show up only for residents of a specific housing association, etc., because they restrict them to only their tenants.
Sorry, I was just going to say, it's also sometimes about the, as Melissa was just saying, it's also about what you're eligible to bid for. So when you see the original ads, you can see everything. When you log in to bid, you can only bid for what you're entitled to bid for in terms of bedroom size, what band you're in, how long you've been waiting. So things like that will make a difference. And so sometimes you can see it on the advert, but when you log in, then your details go into the system and it can see what you're entitled to bid for. So it may stop you from bidding for the property that you've previously seen.
Chair, just quickly, I think a lot of these questions could actually be addressed once we've seen the tutorial or how Locator works in the second part. And as we said at the beginning, if it's necessary to bring the officers back for questioning later, that could be useful. But it seems, I don't know if my colleagues agree, but it just seems it seems counterproductive to ask the questions without having seen it, which would be under part 2 later, I presume.
Imagine the questions are being asked through experience dealing with housing issues, from my take, because I've got a question as well.
Well, I understand where Councillor Goviel's coming from, but obviously this is a public forum, and it's just to get our understanding. I'm grateful that we will get a presentation. That's great. We will see that when we get to see it. That'll probably make more sense about what you can see before you log in. Although I do find that a little bit bizarre that you can sort of scroll through before you've logged into it. But anyway, thank you.
A quick question before I ask mine.
one. Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask about the paper form that you talked about earlier on, that for people who do not have access, and Councillor Smallwood did talk about digital poverty in this space, and I appreciate that there is a paper form that goes out to people, and I know that after that there is the system bids for itself. I just wanted to ask about that communication then with the resident who is on there, because do they get notified by letter or something that this week these are the properties you've been bid on, or do they get left hanging?
Unfortunately, there isn't anything at the moment automated that person would be notified of any bids if they were placed on the system by their behalf. It would only be at the point that that person was shortlisted for a property that we'd be making contact. So it is a gap there.
Is there any way that gap could be filled? Because if I was a resident and I, didn't have access to all of these things, and I'm left, and then we're just going to councillor surgeries all the time because we haven't. I've got somebody like this at the moment, and it's just that's soul destroying, and it kind of drives you down even further. And I just wonder if that's a gap that's missing, that if that can be taken away, to kind of, I don't know who you have to go to look at something like that, but that point of communication feels like, even if it doesn't have to be every week, it could be once a month or something like that, but kind of what they have been.
Absolutely.
That conscientiousness, I guess.
I'm sure that there's something that we can do in terms of an enhancement with Locator to add that on. I know that we have quite a lot of residents who still make telephone calls to the contact centre to place bids, and so then they can get feedback on where their bids were from the previous week. But certainly we can have a look at an enhancement for those that are on automatic bidding. Thank you.
May I ask a question? Locator banding. I know in your report you mentioned bands A, B, C and D, but there are other bands as well. Could you sort of elaborate on the other bands, please?
Yes, so we primarily have bands A to D, but there is within band A 3 additional priorities there. So one is for those that are required to move due to decanting. One is for people who are under occupiers, and the other is for people who are management transfers. And so anybody who are in those criteria are put above those ordinary band A's on the housing register. So they are given enhanced priority there as well.
The band that interested me was the overcrowding band, because there's applicants with housing needs, for example, if you are overcrowded by 2 or more bedrooms, and there was one that was medium priority, with people overcrowded, again, with 2 bedrooms and with severe medical problems. Because I did a lot of Googling on this, so yes, thank you very much. I think that's clear. Everybody happy? Yeah. Thank you very much, ladies. Melissa and Maggie, thank you. Item 6, forward plan. Liz? Sorry?
Noted.
Work program, Liz?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, it was really just to ask if anybody has any comments or questions about the work programme, but if not, I guess this would just be for noting as well. Okay, thank you.
Right. End of public session. That is the end of the meeting. Thank you for those members of the public watching on YouTube. Will everyone please remain silent until Democratic Services has confirmed that the live broadcast has ended. Thank you.